You're listening to Galloway & Company, a show that got a whole heck of a lot better since Matt Mosley pledged his allegiance to the UK. Don't forget tomorrow on the Ben and Skin Show, we answer a burning Ranger question about Pudge. And now back to spit nails in your ear hole, the great Randy Galloway. Kill him, Randy.
Galloway actually, Skin, is at his diabetes fundraiser at Lone Star Park today. He'll be raising hundreds of thousands of dollars to fight diabetes. He will be back in tomorrow. Tim McMahon is here with me, though, here on ESPN Dallas, 103.3 FM. We'll check out what Brian Broaddus has. The Cowboys taking at number 14 in the upcoming draft. But first, Billy Bob's rocks this weekend with Jack Ingram on Friday and Big Rich on Saturday. Tickets are now available online at billybobstexas.com. But right now, we want to give a pair of those tickets away to the third caller at 214-787-1687. Listen all day to Galloway & Company. You never know when you're going to be a winner. Brian Broaddus, how are you, sir?
Jenny Mac, Ian, I'm doing wonderful.
It is the ESPN Mock 2.0 for you, and you know you have one more coming out next week. We are 1 week away from the upcoming NFL draft. Last week you had the Cowboys selecting Mark Barron. You've told us that they are very high on this guy, but all of a sudden David DeCastro comes in recently and pays a visit to Valley Ranch. With the 14th selection in the upcoming NFL draft, you have the Cowboys selecting
David DeCastro. And the reason being is that I do believe that they're looking at David DeCastro to potentially play center. And, you know, with who they brought in at guard, well, that still might be a possibility. But I think that they're interested right now in maybe starting DeCastro out at center and then going from there. So he seems like to be the one offensive guy that is really on their radar right now when we're talking about first-round players. So I tried to be a little bit different here. I still think it's you're looking at defensive lineman Barron, but you also now have to consider David DeCastro and looking at him as a potential center in this offense.
You know, I wouldn't mind a DeCastro pick at all, just because I think it's like Tyron Smith last year. You're drafting a guy who's probably going to be a very good starter for you for a decade on the offensive line. But what will confuse me is, why did they? I still don't get this. Why did they sign two maybe mediocre guards when clearly this is a need that at least one of those spots they could fill it in the draft?
Well, you know what, Tim? I do believe this. They're possibly not going to be able to get DeCastro. Okay, now I think there's a couple of guys that they're holding on. I put DeCastro in there because if he does slide to them at 14. I think that's very well could be the direction I go. You know, Fletcher Cox is another guy that they're going to have to put in there. But I don't know if he gets to him at 14. I think that they went into free agency with the thought of, okay, let's try to protect ourselves. Once they started building their board, they're saying, okay, if DeCastro is the guy that we really like, he could be in the mix. You know, but we got these defensive ends. You know, I'm just saying, though, I feel like that they're just trying to protect themselves. But if DeCastro is better on their board than, say, Brockers or Barron, then that's where DeCastro is going to come in.
Hold on, Broaddus, real quick. We're going to try and get you in a better cell area because you're a little faint and kind of breaking up. But I did catch there that he's saying, look, it's right now it's DeCastro over Brockers and the Upshaws and guys like that. And look, I'm just a big believer in take the best guy that's on your board. Yeah. Even if there's a need there or not. Need is free agency. Draft is best player available. All right, Broaddus, let's see if we got you in a better cell area, my man. How is that better?
I'm good. Can you hear me guys okay now?
Much better. Right. Thank you. Good. So is there a change in philosophy at Valley Ranch? And it did start last year under Jason Garrett, where we haven't seen them take an offensive lineman since, 1981, whatever the heck it was, in the top 10, and they go with Tyron Smith. And now you're saying they may be going with another offensive lineman in the first round. So has there actually been a change in philosophy where there may actually be a philosophy at Valley Ranch when it comes to the draft?
Well, I think I would say there's a little bit of a change of philosophy. A lot has to do with the head coach, I believe. But, you know, I think that when they're sitting at 14, that's kind of where the players they're looking at. They're looking at, you know, potentially the best. They're looking at the best guard, center guy in the draft. I mean, it's a lot has to do with where you are on the board. But, I mean, I like I said, I feel like DeCastro is a consideration. The defensive ends are surely a consideration, and Barrett's a consideration. So I think that they're really covering their bases here in a way that as they're building this board, they don't see, you know, okay, well, maybe we're not going to get an opportunity to get a guy like DeCastro, so in the second or third round. So, or maybe at that position, so maybe they're thinking, well, we've got to go ahead and hit this now, and then we can get either a defensive end or an outside linebacker or a safety a little bit later in this draft. So I think they're just really trying to cover all their bases from the conversations that I've had with them.
Talking to Brian Broaddus, the official scout of all things ESPN Dallas, and discussing his mock draft. It's on ESPNDallas.com right now, version 2.0. And Broaddus, in the first version, you had the Cowboys taking Alabama safety Mark Barron at number 14.
Yeah.
In this one, you've got Barron slipping all the way to the Broncos at 25. Do you get a sense that the Cowboys are cooling on Barron? I know you've had hesitation about him just in terms of his fit into what the Cowboys need.
Yeah, Tim, I really feel like that, and I've seen 10 games now of Mark Barron play, and I watched him last night, and, Ian, I've heard Ian talk about he's a strong safety type of a player, and, I've watched all the majority of his games, and I'm trying to find games where they use him in coverage, and the one thing that we've all seen with the Cowboys, and I believe this all along, they need somebody that is a true free safety, somebody that has some range, somebody that can play on the back end. Mark Barron is a physical, tough, near-the-line of scrimmage type guy, drives on the football on the underneath routes. They put him occasionally in the coverage, but, I think they need something more back there coverage-wise. And now when you start saying, okay, are we willing to pick a guy at 14 that we feel like has got some limitations, or do we want to take this guard that we know can fit in, can be a very productive player on our offensive line, or do we need one of these defensive ends that we really, really like? I think when you start weighing it all out, is Mark Barron a better player than, say, Brockers, Cox, or DeCastro? That's what they got to weigh out right now if you're the Dallas Cowboys.
Brian, if DeCastro is gone at 14 of the defensive ends or and let's just go pure pass rusher here. If they have a pass rusher as the best available player on their board, and you're in that war room with them, who are you recommending that they take at 14 of the best available pass rushers?
Well, are you saying it's going to be Fletcher Cox? Because Fletcher Cox is a better pass rusher than Michael Brockers. So are you telling me that Fletcher Cox is still on the board?
Cox, Upshaw, Brockers, all those guys, Melvin Ingram, they're all on the board.
I'm taking the defensive end. That's a position. I'm not going to play another snap with Kenyon Coleman, and I'm surely looking to upgrade Spears. Hatcher played a little bit better, but I'm looking to upgrade Kenyon Coleman there. I'm going to take, if Fletcher Cox is on the board over the safety, yeah, I'm going that route.
One thing, if I'm in the Cowboys front office, I'm looking at this draft and thinking, okay, we can't make more financial mistakes. They're about to make they're kind of hedging their bets on Anthony Spencer, paying him $8.8 million this year. They cannot give him a long-term deal at that kind of money. You can't pay a guy more than $1 million per sack. That's just stupid if he plays a premier pass rushing position. And at corner, Mike Jenkins, you think he's not looking at Brandon Carr's contract and saying, hey, that seems about right for me going into my contract year? How much do you sense that they consider outside linebacker and cornerback priorities, even though they don't necessarily need a guy to step in and start right now?
That's a really good question, and I think that's where Courtney Upshaw comes into play here, because I think Courtney Upshaw is the fallback position if they were to drop back in the draft and all of a sudden guys start getting picked off. Okay, Fletcher Cox is gone. DeCastro goes. Barron goes. Now all of a sudden you're sitting there and you're like, okay, who are we going to take? I think that's where Courtney Upshaw is going to come into play here. And I think that's why, I've never got the impression that they're really comfortable picking Courtney Upshaw at 14. I just haven't got that feeling. It's always been Barron. It's always been one of the defensive ends. That's where the feeling that I've got. And I totally agree with you. I think if you add Courtney Upshaw, you do add a physical point-of-attack player that can give you some pass rush. I mean, just watch the film. You can see that. He would be a guy that could very well replace Anthony Spencer. So I think that they feel like, okay, center, defensive end, safety are more important. And that's why I think you see them tag Anthony Spencer, because they probably feel like that they've got the same or similar type of players. There's going to be some guys in the second or third round that are going to be these converted defensive ends, outside linebacker guys that they can very well take a crack at.
Broadus, great stuff. Go check out the entire draft, his second mock on ESPNDallas.com. Thank you, man, as always. We appreciate it.
Thanks, boys. Appreciate it now.
All right, Brian Broadus here with us on Galloway & Company.
And let me get in a little plug for the football show. We'll be at 4 o'clock Saturday. It is the pre-draft edition of the football show. I'll be on there with Teddy Emmerich and Brian Broadus, and we will be picking Broadus's brain for the entire show. Obviously, he has put in a ton of time studying the prospects in this draft, and we'll open up the vault to all his knowledge Saturday, 4 o'clock on ESPN Dallas 103.3.
You do not want to miss the football show. Great listen every single Saturday. Coming up next here on Galloway & Company, as Galloway is off with his fundraiser, raising a lot of money to fight diabetes. McMahon and I will let you know about a shocking expose in ESPN, the magazine, on college campuses. We'll give you all the details next.